This is the Troutbitten Podcast.
Troutbitten.
Troutbitten?
Troutbitten.
Troutbitten.
Troutbitten?
Yeah, Troutbitten.
Troutbitten.
It's about trout.
Wild trout. This is Troutbitten.
This is the Troutbitten Podcast, and thank you for tuning in. My name is Dominic Swintoski. I am the owner of Troutbitten and the author of Troutbitten.com. So to everyone out there listening, welcome to the Winter Fly Fishing Skills Series. This is Season 6 of the Troutbitten Podcast. And let me explain how this season goes. It's now been a year and a half since the Troutbitten Podcast began. And something we do a little differently than most other podcasts is to break things down into seasons. There are two formats for these seasons. First, in the spring and the fall, I have my full panel of Troutbitten friends. Those episodes are about an hour long, and we cover a variety of topics that change each week. Some are technical, others are about sharing stories and experiences, or they are some commentary on the fly fishing world. In Season 7, by the way, we'll start adding a few interviews to the mix as well. Those main seasons, in spring and fall, are longer, and they have about a dozen episodes in each. Now, the second format for the Troutbitten Podcast happens in the winter and the summer. That's the Skills Series format. That's what we're starting here. It's a full series about fly fishing in the winter months. Last winter, we did the 9 essential skills for tightline and Euro nymphing. And last summer, we did the 3 styles of dry dropper. The episodes in a skills series are tightly packed with information, with less storytelling and conversation. These end up to be about a half hour long. And there aren't as many episodes in a season. Also in these skills series episodes, I do not have my full panel of friends. It's just me and Austin Dando working through the tactics.
Hey now.
So we really love both of these formats for a podcast. And it's been a good decision to break things up from the beginning. Having the Troutbitten Podcast divided into these seasons gives us a little time off between seasons with a chance to regroup and to keep things fresh. And by having the Skills Series format, it gives us a chance to really dig into just one topic. I don't think you can find that anywhere else. So here is my friend and co-host for this season, Austin Dando. Austin is arguably the most well-rounded of all my fishing friends, and I know some pretty good dudes. Aside from the trout fishing, Austin hunts a little, does some rock climbing, plays guitar, is handy with home improvement, brews beer, and he drinks it. Does that sound about right, Austin?
Oh, man. Will that be cash or check, Dom?
Cash. Those aren't all your skills.
Nah, that's a short list.
That's the short. What else? You want to brag a little?
Yeah, why not? I do a little bit of photography, I do a little bit of woodworking.
Good point. Thank you. Do you feel slighted that I left those things out?
A little.
I do feel bad about the photography angle. Austin, seriously, in fact, Austin adds a ton of fantastic photography to the website, and I thank you for that.
You're welcome.
Hey, dude. Hey, so you texted me the other day that you and Paige, your wife, are planning a trip to Norway.
Yeah.
I wanted to ask you about that. Why
Sure.
Norway?
Well, so the last vacation we took was sort of all of my planning, and we went back to Missoula, Montana, and we did a bit of a Western tour, and we agreed that the next vacation, she would sort of take the preference on, and she really wants to go to Norway, which is fine with me. Yeah. And then maybe bop over to Italy as well, which is cool. So we're looking at traveling into Oslo, flying to Oslo, and from there go up north and then make our way back down south. And we don't really know anything about Norway other than its beautiful countryside and things like that. So we're trying to plan that for hopefully the springtime here. We're going to book tickets, and then we also like to fish for at least a day or two, and experience some of that. It looks like there's some really good trout fishing and grayling, and maybe some char too. So I'm hoping to get into something.
Nice. That's why you got in touch with me. You said, "Hey, do you know anybody from Norway?" If people got in touch with, and I do. I have. I've had people get in touch with me from kind of all over the world by this point.
Right.
But I looked for Norway. I don't have anybody. I don't have any.
Ooh.
So anybody out there listening, if you want to get in touch and help Austin out a little bit, seriously,
If anybody out there is in Norway,
just get him into a trout, a grayling.
knows something about the fishing.
That's what I'd want.
That's right.
You're right, because we have no grayling in Central PA. Get me into a grayling in Norway, please.
Yes. The invitation, well, I don't have an invitation. I'll accept an invitation if one exists.
Isn't that cool? It might happen.
Yeah.
All right, so hey, we should dig in because that's what we do in this
Do it.
skills series. It's not as loose, so tighten up. You ready?
I'm ready.
Skills series. No goofing around. It's all about data entry. You ready?
Ready to go.
Everything you know about winter fishing. By the end of this, seriously, we're going to do 8 episodes on winter fishing. And by the end of this, we'll have, at least 4, more like 5 hours, maybe 5 to 6 hours of, good advice, I think, for winter, how to take your fly fishing game into the winter.
Yeah. No, it's going to be good. I'm excited.
So let's talk really a little bit more about what this season holds. Fly fishing in the winter, that's our topic. There will be 8 episodes this season, and here's the lineup. Let me run down each episode. Yes, I kind of have it mapped out. The first one is the system or the plan, which is what we're calling this one. This is an overview. What we're about to talk about is an overview about where to fish, where to find trout, and really what to expect out there. And then episode 2 is, believe it or not, all about your hands. That's it. We're going to do a full podcast on the most important thing, which is to keep your hands warm and functional. We're going to talk about why. And trust me, there is a lot here about keeping your hands warm and, useful. Episode 3 will be head, shoulders, knees, and toes because your mom told you to layer up, right? But there's really a lot more to it. Nymphing in the winter, streamer fishing in the winter, dry flies, midges, emergers, and more is its own episode. Winter problems and then winter solutions, which there are a lot of problems. There are a lot of tough things that we encounter. We could probably do 2 hours on that topic. And then we'll have the roundtable review, which we do at the end of every skills series season with the other guys coming in and saying, hey, you guys forgot about this. Hey, we do it differently. We do it that way. So those are the titles or the topics for these 8 episodes in this winter skills series. Now, if you're a Troutbitten regular, then you might very well recognize that many of these podcast topics are from a series that I published on the Troutbitten website. The Fly Fishing in the Winter series on Troutbitten is an ongoing collection of articles that digs in and gets technical about what is required to take our favorite pastime into the coldest months of the year to keep catching trout and enjoying the experience. Sometimes even better than all other times of the year. And really, that's where I am, Austin, to be honest. I mean, winter has become my favorite season of the year to be out there. And actually, I wish there was more snow on the ground and it was a little bit colder right now. Are you with me or against me on that?
No, I am with you. Just like you, I really love the 4 full seasons we experience in Pennsylvania.
Yeah.
And when it's wintertime, like I want it to be cold.
Yeah.
And I like to suffer a little bit. I like that challenge of making it through the day and overcoming the obstacles and the difficulties of fishing in the winter. And I kind of rely on that as a quarter of my fishing season to keep me sharp in those aspects.
That's one of the things right there. You enjoy the suffering a little bit. I always say like something's going to hurt.
Yeah, it is.
And if you're a winter fisherman, we should say right away, what we're talking about is not 50 degrees. No. 40 degrees is like a warm winter day. We will fish
warm.
when it's 10 degrees. I fished when it was single digits out, yes. And yes, you can do that on a fly rod. And all the stuff we're going to talk about in this series will help you do that. And so we're talking, I don't know, around here, average 20, 25, 30, 35 degrees. Is that fair?
Yeah, that's absolutely fair. You and I were out, last week?
About a week ago, yeah.
We've ran into a warm patch of weather here.
Yeah.
And it was, mid 40s, 50s with a light jacket on, and it just doesn't feel right.
It didn't. And I was taking layers off, and I was like down to my base layer. I'm like, this is silly.
Yeah.
Yeah, I
I
like
like
it
the cold.
like you. If it's winter, give me winter. If it's spring, give me spring, and so on. I love that we have the 4 seasons here. And it keeps you sharp because you constantly have to change. I will say that when you and I were fishing and it was 45 degrees out, fair enough, but just the week before it was down to like 15 degrees.
Right.
And for the most part, really, these trout are in the winter rhythms or the habits that we're going to talk about here. They
Yeah.
still acted like it was wintertime. The air temperature can change week to week.
Yeah.
And unless, I guess, it warms up to 60 or 70 degrees for a month, these trout are going to, every December, every January, February, March, they're going to act like it's wintertime.
That's an excellent point. I really don't think they transition that fast.
Right.
Like you said, a month maybe it would take to really get their mindset and their behaviors to change.
Yeah.
1 or 2 warm days is not going to change their world.
No. So they were still in those winter habits, and we approached them that way. Now, the reward for finding a winter fishing system is, it can be both high numbers and larger trout. And like you said, the reward just of knowing that you beat the elements, that's a big deal too. Just that
Definitely.
enjoyment. If you're that type of person, well, like Austin and I are, that enjoys kind of meeting a challenge and overcoming it, even if you're not catching fish, even if you only come out of the day with 2 or 3 fish to hand, you know that you were able to do it. That's a reward in itself. But lots of times, yeah, you can still have high numbers, and often you will catch larger trout. You agree with the larger trout point?
I don't know.
No, you don't think so? I feel like my
can't say-
average trout is larger in the winter.
I can't say the same.
Fair enough.
I feel like I experience similar size trout yearly. I don't know. Unless you're, unless you're saying that the more larger trout are more active or available to feed on our presentations in the wintertime. What do you think causes that? If you don't mind me asking.
Yeah. If Matt was here, if Matt Grobe, our buddy Matt, was here, he would say that it's because there's much less angler pressure. So those trout are willing to be out. I would say
what would you say?
I would say it's a lower sun angle.
Cool.
Less light, extended nighttime periods. Right now, I mean, the sun's, you got less sun than any other time of the year.
Yeah.
We've passed that winter solstice, and the days are getting a little bit longer. But for the most part, I mean, it's low light conditions. Yeah. I think that's why. But, there's other reasons too. I do. I catch the average trout is a little bigger for me in the winter.
That's a good reason.
You just got to get better at fishing, Austin.
Yeah. You're just that much better than me.
It must be. What if Bill was here?
Yeah.
What would he say?
Have a totally different opinion regardless.
Yeah, that's true. Anyway, I think the acceptable range for error, let's say, is more narrow. Like what you have to do tactically and with your techniques, I think the trout are less forgiving. I think it's a harder mark to hit, put it that way.
Agree.
Like in large part, I think that's because the trout simply don't respond as much because the water's colder and they don't move as far. They're often just not as hungry as they are, let's say in the spring, in the summer, and the fall. And we'll get to this too, they're just not as spread out. They're not as available in many different, water types yet. But when we do find that target, and when you do find the formula for the day, the water type and the pattern and the level that they're feeding for the day or for the moment, you find that formula, then I say success flows freely. And that's where I say some of my highest number days, if I'm fish counting, some of my highest numbers, the most fish that I'll catch in one day often happen in the winter. Because when you figure it out, often you'll catch pods of fish, just bang, 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 right? And if you want to, quite often you could stand there and bang out 10, 12, 14, 15 fish sometimes.
No, you can. And I have plenty of good memories of those certain scenarios you get into and you sort of crack the code and you realize, okay, 1, they're in this water type, or 2, they're eating this pattern. Yeah. And if I can combine these 2 things all day long, I'm going to have really good success. And the predictability of that is a little bit more forgiving in the wintertime because, there's less viable options that you're going to be, going after.
Right on. I think the word there, predictable, is the key. In the winter, I carry fewer patterns, because I know what they're going to eat. And if they don't, then I'm going to be really surprised. And yeah, I have other stuff, but they're going to eat what I think they are. We're going to get to all that. And they're going to be almost for certain in that same water that they were yesterday. And if you do find one of those spots that you were talking about, I bet if you go next week or the week after, or even a month from now, they're going to be in that same spot.
Yeah.
In the spring, you can't say the same thing. So it's that predictability.
Yeah.
And it might be a harder code to crack, as you put it, the code. But when you do crack it, again, I think the rewards are there and in numbers of fish and for size of fish. Whether it's after a fishing trip or at a backyard fire, you can bet the Troutbitten crew has a case of New Trail Broken Heels along with us. It's honestly our favorite beer. This hazy IPA is smooth and full-bodied. Hand-selected Citra hops lead to notes of bright clementine and juicy ruby red grapefruit. Broken Heels is a keeper. New Trail beer is proudly brewed in Williamsport, Pennsylvania, and delivered cold to your favorite craft beer retailer every week. At New Trail, it's not about being the best angler. It's about getting out there. So enjoy nature's moments and reward yourself for a day well fished with New Trail Broken Heels. It's Troutbitten's favorite beer. Precision Fly and Tackle is a family-owned business with a passion for the outdoors and a sense of adventure. They are anglers who enjoy every moment spent on the water with family and friends. Precision Fly and Tackle carries the widest selection of Euro rods, reels, lines, leaders, flies, and accessories. From the beginner to the advanced angler, Precision Fly and Tackle can outfit every angler, no matter the budget. Visit them online at precisionflyandtackle.com. Then use code TROUTBITTEN10, that's the number 10, for 10% off your order. Gear up with Precision Fly and Tackle for your next adventure. So you're talking about cracking the code, and I like that. I mean, that's day to day, but and it might be easier in the winter. But let's start with this. Like, where are the trout? That's part of the code. Where are they, right?
Yeah. Where they are is going to depend on your local region and where you're fishing. If you're fishing a spring creek, a tailwater, maybe a limestoner or a freestoner, all these options you have available to you, if you have those multitude of options, is going to change your experience out there. Temperatures matter. Fish behavior changes depending on those temperatures often. It's a very open-ended question of where are the trout.
It kind of is. It's not fair. I feel like when we start talking about, right, and I've been writing about winter fishing since about 2019, I think I started that series. I feel like I'm not being fair to people. And that's why I constantly point out, to try to be fair, they're like, hey, we are fishing in some of the best winter fishing conditions around because we're fishing these spring creeks. And if you have to choose one type of water to fish in the winter, go find a spring creek.
Right.
And,
I agree.
Right. Because spring creek, the water comes out of the ground at a fairly constant temperature, and it keeps it warm in the winter and relatively cold in the summer.
Yeah, absolutely. So, let's say you go to a stream, regardless of what the water or the the stream type may be. If you take a temp in the wintertime, are you looking for a certain degree range? Like, hey, this is too cold, it's probably gonna be slow, or okay, it's just right, or how much does that matter to you?
Oh, it matters a lot. Yeah, right. And we did a full podcast. You and I and the guys did a full podcast on this in season 1, and I'll leave a link in these show notes. We talked about this, and all the guys, what was interesting to me is everybody kind of had a different range of temperatures where they felt, most comfortable, like, oh, I'll have success today because it's 36 and above. Bill was even saying that he's fine on freestone streams if there's no, if it's not iced over, he's like, I'll have a great day.
Right.
But for
Food
me,
availability to him. Yeah.
Right. And I just said 36. For me, to answer your question, 36 and up, I really want it to be 36,
nice.
37, 30, really, I want it to be 38 and up. In our spring creeks, like I took the temperature yesterday, it's 42 degrees. And, and 38, I was having good success on another one of our rivers at 38, a fish every 10, 15 minutes, something like that. That's a pretty good rate at any time of the year. And okay, so down to 38, 37, 36 starts to really push it for me. And I will say, I have gone and fished freestone streams, and just had really tough conditions. Sometimes caught nothing or just maybe turned a fish or two. And then I'll take the temperature and it's like 33, 34 degrees.
Right. I've had very similar experiences. It's those days where you think like, there's no fish in this stream. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
Like you don't even spook anything. You don't see one.
Yeah.
You don't catch one. Like, there's no fish in here.
It's tough.
It is tough.
I do feel like if you lived on one of those rivers and there is no ice in the water, like Bill was saying, if it's fishable, it's not just slush, you can fish it. I bet if you lived beside it and you fished it every day, you'd find the places where those fish are holding and feeding. I think that's why when I kind of get out of this Spring Creek region and go into the freestone stuff, usually north of here, I'm back to kind of exploring and trying to find for like one day, because I went north for one day, trying to find where those fish really are. And then I don't. And then I go, well, they're not feeding because it's 35 degrees. Maybe if I fished it for every day for a week, I'd find those very narrow range, that 5%, maybe 10% of the water type where they're really feeding. And then I'd get into a patch of them and I'd catch 10, 12 fish.
Right. I think you would, because to some degree we do the same thing here.
Yes.
On certain, some of our streams are less Spring Creek influenced, and we learn those rhythms, we learn its habits in the wintertime, and we kind of capitalize on those. So when you go to a pure freestone experience, I think the same kind of learning curve would exist in those scenarios too.
Right on. We should mention too, tailwaters. I mean, if you can't find a Spring Creek, go to a tailwater, because obviously there's your more consistent temperatures. Again, wintertime, just like summertime, it does come down to temperature. And if you can find temps, so I'm going to say, the higher the temps in the winter, the better, almost.
Yeah, I don't think there's anything wrong with saying that.
Right, I think that's fair. So what about the water type? Finding, feeding fish within, let's say you have a river that's, going to be in those sort of ideal temperatures for the winter time. Where are they feeding, man?
So again, another open-ended question, and another thing you will read about and watch videos about, similar information, that if it's wintertime, it's got to be small flies, it's got to be low, slow, crawling those flies at the bottom. And in my experience, at least in this part of the country, it could be almost anything. Those fish could be feeding up 3 inches below the surface. They could be way down, stuck to the bottom. Yeah. It's really up to us to figure that out and to check each level.
Yeah. You told me about a day not too long ago where they were eating your tag fly, which was probably riding, you said, how high off the bottom?
Yeah, the tag fly, at least from the surface, was probably only at max 6 inches in some of those areas of water
from the surface.
They were so spread out. Yeah. Especially when I got into some more shallow water types, and they just kept eating it. When I was fishing deeper water and they were eating the tag, like, whatever, it's 20 inches off the bottom, but this is some pretty deep water. And then I'd get into those more shallow, medium-sized riffles, and they're still eating the tag. Okay, that's telling me something.
Oh, I love that. I feel like you only learn that stuff by being out there often. If you go out one or 2 days this winter, that's okay. That's great. But don't make too many judgments about the way winter fishing is. Because what you're describing, Austin, is something that I don't see a lot. I don't see them eating the tag fly all that much in the wintertime. I told you before we started recording this podcast that I was fishing with Trevor, and Trevor was getting a good egg bite, and every fish that was hitting, and they were hitting frequently, was down in the strike zone. It would be drop, 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 strike zone, and then eat. It was almost predictable if you got in that right water type too. It was fun to watch. Trevor was on it. And that's what I expect in the winter. In that kind of zone, in that strike zone, which is, let's say he was 6 or 8 inches off the bottom. That's where his egg was. What you're talking about, I think, is unusual, where they were eating your tag. But you figured it out.
Right.
For that day, that's where, who knows why? Almost who cares why?
Exactly.
Dude, was there any bug activity? Was it happening?
No.
Was there a hatch? Right?
No. There's no hatch.
That's what people want to do, is correlate.
No good reason.
Right. There was no good reason. Well, there was a midge hatch. Well, there was a olive hatch, which is the only 2 things that could really have been happening, maybe. Yeah. But was there? No. So who knows why? But if that's what the fish want to do, like, you figured it out for that day, and then you started focusing. That's what you told me. You started focusing on it.
Absolutely.
Like, okay, if that's what they're going to eat, that's what I'm doing.
Right. And I'm not saying necessarily like to get hung up on the fact that maybe they're eating the tag today. It's not a bad idea to think, okay, the majority of my fishing trips, this may be an outlier.
Yeah.
But the majority of my fishing trips, I found best success on the bottom, which is a fair statement.
Yeah.
But also not neglecting the chances to give the trout to say, hey, I'm also going to eat here. So,
right on.
Don't get hung up on making sure that you've picked apart every single piece of every option ever. You can maximize those best options and then also, give the trout a chance to tell you something different.
Nice. Yeah, I just love staying open-minded to the day and what's going to happen. Honestly, I used to go out there years ago. I don't know, a decade ago. I was probably still going out there and trying to force feed the trout what they ate yesterday.
Nice.
And now one of my favorite things to do is just go out there, stay open-minded, and okay, maybe tomorrow, and I'm going out tomorrow morning, maybe they'll eat the tag. And so I will. I'll put a tag on. I'm going to say they probably won't, so I'm not going to spend more than 20 or 30 minutes on it. I might come back to it if my action's slow, but if I'm going to run a second fly, I might keep it down low, and getting into that strike zone. And we're going to talk more about that when we get to the nymphing podcast. But
that's good stuff.
And I do think, obviously, your tactics factor into all of this as well. Like, where are you going to find the feeding fish? Well, how are you going to approach them? Maybe you don't want to try to figure out, are they eating the streamers or are they eating nymphs today? Can I find a dry fly hatch? Maybe you really do want to say, all right, I'm going out there. I just bought these eggs at the fly shop. These nuke eggs or these sucker spawn or whatever your pattern is.
Yep.
I just bought these patterns. I'm going to fish that. Well, great. And like I said, that's what I used to do, is kind of go force feed them. But your tactics then are going to factor into that as well. And if you are using that nymphing approach, are you going to fish the pools? Are you going to fish the flats, the glides, the pocket water, the riffles, and the runs? You're going to fish the whole river? Or are you going to fish just parts of those rivers? Are you going to ignore some of the stuff, that doesn't suit your tactic better?
Right. That's a really great question. And again, I think I would find a similar answer for me personally. So I'm not going to have, based on my historical data, overwhelming success in the hardest, fastest runs in dead of winter.
Agreed.
I may have good success in the tailouts of those runs where they, dump into a pool or a riffle or what have you, but I'm not going to focus a lot of attention in those areas. Yeah. And I'm going to focus my attention in some of those transitional areas in the wintertime, especially where it's going from a riffle into a run and then that run into a pool. Again, we talked about potting up fish. I think they do that quite a bit and kind of hold steady. And when you run into those pods, again, another part of cracking that code. But it's not that I'm not going to try to fish those areas. I will, but it's probably not going to be exhausted. Like you kind of said, 20 minutes on this tactic or that. If they're not eating it, I'm going to have a decent idea. I'll probably move on. Yeah.
I fish pools and flats and glides. Let's say all that slower stuff more in the winter than I do any other time of the year. The other times of the year when I really focus on the pools, the flats, the glides is when they're eating dries. And I love, I love catching fish out. We all do. Everybody loves targeting dry fly activity in that slower water. I also fish dries in fast water when they're rising there too.
Yep.
But in the winter, I'll kind of settle down. If I find a pod of fish that's working, that's when I'll slow it down. And we're going to talk about all of that a little bit more. Hey, what about time of day? We touched on this in that winter fly fishing tactics podcast way back in season 1 with all the guys. You out there at dawn or you out there at noon?
Yeah, so my answer remains the same. If you're able to go out at dawn, get out there at dawn.
Yeah.
A lot of the fly shops or a lot of the websites you read will tell you, hey, go out once the water warms up. Those trout love it, and then they'll start feeding.
Yeah.
I don't know really where that came from.
No.
I've never found that to help me out much. Regardless, I think for me at least, I still love being out at dawn, and it continues to be one of the more predictable times of the day, regardless that it's wintertime.
I'm with you. And here's just one example. Trevor and I met on Saturday morning. He was at my house way before dawn, and we were making our first cast. I'm going to say, in that twilight before dawn.
Nice.
And, I went downstream. Trevor went upstream. I fished streamers. I had about 4 fish in the first 45 minutes, and I was feeling pretty good about myself. and then I finally caught up to Trevor, who was fishing pretty fast upstream. And I kind of caught up to him, but he doubled back, and he comes up to the side of the stream, and he said, "How's it going?" I said, "Not bad, like 4, and I missed 2 other ones on the streamer. How about you?" He goes, "I caught 15.
Hey now.
Hey now. He was kind of surprised by it too, though. I mean, that's a lot in 45 minutes. He caught 15 stream. I don't care what time of the year it is, but especially for the winter. When fairly, and we should point this out, I think it's fair to say that our expectations for numbers are a little lower in the winter, even on the best days. Yeah. Anyway, 15. I'm like, whoa, there you go. Like, what are you doing, bud? Then he told me what he's doing and whatever, and we'll talk about that some other time.
Yeah.
But the point is, it was dawn. I mean, it was just an hour after daylight by the time we were talking about, hey, how many did you catch? And that, honestly, so we fished until about 1:30, I think it was. That was the best fishing of the day. There is just no doubt about it. And he continued to use the same tactic, and then he added, a trailer. He added a tag above. We were fishing different water types. We continued to try to adjust to the trout. Both of us did.
Yeah.
But there was no equaling the action that he had right after dawn.
Yeah.
For over a decade, Smith Creek has provided innovative, high-quality fly fishing accessories designed to put your gear in easy reach, free up your hands, and keep our waters clean. For 2023, check out the all-new patented tippet holder. Each unit is individually machined from billet aluminum and anodized in 2 eye-catching colors. They hold up to 5 tippet spools with a spring-loaded plunger that is quick and easy to use, keeping your tippet spools right where you need them. Also, the brand new Rod Clip Plus comes with an improved 304 steel pin, plus a carabiner clip, giving you 2 ways to attach it. All Smith Creek products are built guide tough and backed by solid customer service. To learn more about Smith Creek products, visit their website at smithcreek.co. Tactical Fly Fisher was founded by Fly Fishing Team USA angler Devin Olson to bring anglers cutting-edge gear and techniques from the international competitive fly fishing scene. Tactical Fly Fisher's aim is to help you improve your angling ability so you can have more fun on the water. Whether you need some flies, fly tying equipment, or a new rod or reel, they've got you covered. Head on over to tacticalflyfisher.com and use the code TBPOD10, that's TBPOD10, to get 10% off flies, fly tying supplies, or terminal tackle.
All right. So let's say, like you just said, you and Trevor were out the other day.
Yeah.
Maybe the pace that we fish, let's say.
We covered a lot of water.
Okay. So, a common misconception can kind of be, people think that you stand in one spot all day and that's where the best fishing is. You stand in that soft glide or whatever it may be, and you get those flies low and slow, and you just kind of hope that it works.
Yeah.
Would you say that's how we fish? Or
No.
How do we approach it?
No, I mean, when I find that pocket of feeding fish, I'm going to slow down. And sometimes I'll slow down so much, and if it's a 15-degree day, I'm getting cold. And I'm like, man, I got to move again. But it's been an hour, and I've been banging fish for an hour. But no.
It's a hard life.
Yeah, it's rough. It's rough out there. But we grind it. We grind it.
We grind it.
We grind it. But, anyway, that is not how we fish. We really don't just go, hop over the guardrail, get in that one spot and fish it for 5 hours.
Yeah.
No thanks. No thank you. Personally, I build a lot of movement into my winter fishing for a few different reasons, really. Nice. So I can cover water to figure out where the fish are feeding, because where I think they might be feeding or where they were feeding yesterday might be different today. They might be eating near tag like you were talking about. They might be eating in a little bit faster water than they were yesterday. I'll cover water, honestly, so I can stay warm. If it is 12 degrees outside, gosh, that's hard. I don't care how good your layering is. And all the stuff we're going to talk about in episodes 2 and 3 of this podcast, I don't care how good that is. You need to move to generate some body heat so those layers that you're wearing can hold in that body heat that you just generated. Eventually, right? It eventually gets lost, and you need to generate new heat. And so that's another reason I'll move. I move. Yep. I move and I fish, and I move and I fish.
And especially like, you and we're not afraid to wade deep. So oftentimes we're, up to our waist or over it in some of the bigger waters. And when we get into that sort of depth, it's even more prone to suck the heat right out of your body. So it is essential to just keep moving upstream. And, it's fun to do that too. We get to see more water. We get to experience more wildlife. It's just it's a good way to fish in the wintertime.
Yeah. And one of the things we didn't even touch on yet is just the solitude.
Yeah, good point.
It's pretty much yours out there. And I don't care how much more popular winter fishing gets, it's still going to be pretty much yours out there. Most people will not battle through the uncomfortable feelings of being out there. And really the difficulty of fishing that it can be to be out there. So it's yours. And quite often, especially if you pick some water that's sort of off the beaten path, it's all yours. So wade upstream or get out of the river and, like you say, go see that next piece of water because it's pretty. It's just pretty, I love it.
And not to say, when it's 50 degrees out in the middle of the wintertime, you may have some other people to deal with. That's not what we're talking about.
No.
We're talking about 30 degrees and below. We're talking about 8 degrees outside.
Yeah.
You're not going to have people to compete with.
Right on. When I'm guiding and I start talking to people about winter fishing, they'll say, well, hey, yeah, I do that sometimes. They'll say, my cutoff is 30 degrees. My cutoff is 32 degrees. Or people will say, my cutoff's 40 degrees. Everybody has these cutoffs. And it is clear as day. I've mentioned before on this podcast that almost every day I go beside one of the most popular pieces of water probably in the state. And I can almost predict how many cars I'm going to see in that 3-mile stretch on a 50-degree day in January or on a 15-degree day in January.
Right.
It's going to be 10 cars or it's going to be 0 cars, maybe 1.
Yeah. It's funny to hear you even mention like the cutoff or mental cutoff in somebody's head because I've never really thought that way. I never considered like, oh, it's 8 degrees, so fishing's off the table today. It's like, oh, it's 8 degrees. Let's see how fishing's going to go.
Yeah, right on. Same. What's the lowest you ever fished in?
Probably 5.
Yeah.
I don't think I've gone 0 or less than.
No, Grobe has. And in our
he has no choice.
He's talking out in Montana like that.
Yeah.
We don't have that around here. The lowest I ever fished in was 3 degrees to start, 5 degrees to finish. And
that's a long day right there.
I caught 7 fish. I did keep count. I caught 7 fish. It was noon. I picked the wrong water. That was dumb. Looking back, the water that I fished was down in a canyon, and it was a windy day. In addition to being 3 degrees, brutal. Yet the sun was out. Strange conditions. I picked up 7 fish and I got out of there because I'm telling you, it was still 5 degrees when I got. I'm talking about what it showed on my truck, that thermometer. And I was like, whoa, that is cold. And it was brutal in a good way though, like you say. Like I'm telling stories about it now, man, because it's a memory. We love that.
You could have caught more if you wanted to.
If I wanted to, I could have caught 70 trout.
If you really wanted to.
If I held back.
He held back.
Of course, you're joking. All right. Hey, let's go through this a little bit. We're going to get into full podcasts about this, but this is the overview, right? Nymphing is my first option. I don't mean I always start with nymphs. Sometimes, like the other day, when Trevor and I were fishing, I started with streamers. You know why? Because when we were talking about it the other day, Bill was like, I almost always start with streamers, when it's that early. I think you said the same thing. So that was in my head, and I'm like, I've been starting with streamers lately. And so when I say nymphing as a first option, what I really mean is I assume it's going to be the best option. If I'm into this for catching trout, I assume that nymphs are going to be our best option. However, right off the bat here, like when you and I fished a week ago, what was the best?
Streamer.
Right. And we kept trying to prove it wrong. Like I kept going back to nymphs. You went to nymphs, and then we're like, streamers, man. They're eating streamers. Yep. Between the two of us, one of us was always on streamers, it seemed. And that's what they were eating. And it's hard to argue with them. That's what they're eating. So you never know. But nymphing is a first option. Like I often say that the nymph angler is sustainable. I wrote an article with that title like many years ago, meaning that having a good having good nymphing skills allows you to fish for trout in almost any situation. Really, any situation. And that's our winter approach too, right?
Yeah, it absolutely is. I mean, again, it comes down to that factor of predictability. Fish are not, if you're looking for a general overview, they're not looking to travel very far. They're not looking to exert a lot of energy.
Yeah.
They're really focused on holding their lie, consuming the food that comes down the pipeline, and just kind of holding tight. Now, again, there's those days where there's outliers and they're doing all sorts of funny things, but if we're looking for general rules of thumb, that's a pretty safe place to start with a nymph rig.
Yeah, for sure. And then I mix in streamers just to cover more water.
Keep moving.
Right, and build up some body heat, right, to stay warm. And really to have fun too, because streamers just, and it might get you more action like it did for us the other day. You just never know. And so I'm certainly not going to prospect with dry flies. I'm really not.
Me neither.
By prospect, I mean, I'm not just throwing a number 18 parachute Adams on there and seeing if they'll eat it. Go ahead.
Let us know how you do.
Yeah, let us know how that goes for you by the end of this winter season.
Yeah.
And that would be tough for us in our experience. But really, I am looking for those dry fly opportunities. And when we get to the dry fly and the midge and the emergers podcast, we're going to talk about that. That is absolutely an option. But boy, that's something I'm looking for. And that's not my baseline. The nymphs, for me, are my baseline. And I kind of center my winter fishing around that. That's home base,
Yeah. So, we're talking about nymphs here. Maybe talk about the selection of nymphs. We read a lot about, flies, if you're going to be fishing in the winter, you're going to be looking at really small stuff, midges, really small crest bugs.
Got to be small.
What's your take on that?
Well, you brought it up earlier about water types and regions. And so what we talk about, like I said, sometimes I know that what we talk about isn't completely fair. We're saying what works around here. But you and I, too, have fished plenty in the winter in plenty of different regions and places. So I think it holds true. And we have buddies and friends that fish in places where they'll tell you, hey, it's wintertime. Fish a pair of 22 midges, and that's all they're going to eat. And that's just not the case, all the time. Small, tiny flies and midges and olives, not always. But I fish an egg. We're going to get into this more in the nymphing podcast, right? Mm-hmm. I fish an egg sort of as my primary fly. That could be various colors. I fish stone flies. I'll fish attractor flies. And I'm going to say this, this is a big deal to me, color in the wintertime.
Right on.
Right. I think for me, what I believe is that there's something that motivates them to move just a little bit more, or it just motivates them to move a couple inches. Maybe they're not hungry. I always say, are they hungry? Are they curious? Are they nobody home, nobody hungry?
Right. Nobody home, nobody hungry.
Right. Yeah. These are more article titles. But I'm always thinking these things when I'm out there. For some reason, I feel like if I give them some kind of color, sometimes that color is actually pure white.
Okay.
Like a pure white worm or a pink worm or an orange egg, a yellow egg. It could be something bigger like a stone fly that seems to motivate them. Maybe that's a 10 or a 12 or an 8 or even a 6. Maybe it's a small bugger that I'm nymphing, I'm saying, that, has some serious flash on it. Maybe it's even a small Crelex minnow that I'm kind of nymphing or hopping down on the bottom. Those kinds of things, those bigger food forms with color, I'm saying, seems to motivate them. That's what I'm kind of looking for.
Okay.
That often will be my main fly. And then maybe I have a secondary fly that's more natural along with it.
All right. So let's say your primary selections that day are color-based in the winter. Are you also thinking about hatch, a hatch-based nymph that you might be fishing also with that? Or are you mostly more thinking about color or size before that?
Yeah, color and size mostly. But I'm also not going to ignore hatches. And I think the reason people tell you, hey, you got to fish a midge in the winter, they'll say, hey, that's the only thing that's hatching. Well, okay. It might be the only thing that's in the air occasionally, day to day. Those midges you'll find in the air. Great. That doesn't mean that's the only thing that trout are eating underneath. Just because the midges are, let's say, most active in the river system, it doesn't mean that's all they're eating. In our rivers, you have crest bugs and scuds and stoneflies, which don't ever forget, they're on a 2-year life cycle. So there's all kinds of, there's every size of stonefly down there. And then there's still leftover eggs in the system. There's a lot for them to eat down there. Again, those crest bugs can be size 10s. There's a lot of great variety down there. There's a lot of size down there. It isn't just midges that they're eating. And I haven't done it in the winter, but I assume if you'd pump their stomach and use a pump that actually has a wide enough hole to actually get a big size 10 crest bug in there or a stonefly, you'd see what is in their stomach is not just midges. I think really the only way you could do that would be catch a trout, kill it, open up its stomach, and see what it's really eating. We should acknowledge that. Really pumping fish, if people know what that is. You got to realize what can fit in that little tube opening. Just because all you get is size 16s, 18s, and 20s and smaller doesn't mean that's all they're eating. Do you think a stonefly can fit in that fish pump?
That is actually, I've never really even considered that point before. Yeah. Probably that big stonefly can't get through it. Imagine if it's not going through head first, even if the body hits it going perpendicular. If any larger insect hits it going perpendicular, it's not going to get it sucked up into those pumps. So that's a valuable point to make.
Yeah, I've said before, I grew up killing almost everything we caught. We always cut open the stomachs, and there were always a variety of things in there. I think it's rare too when fish seem to just be feeding on one thing, especially if it's just real small. And we're kind of getting down into the weeds a little more than we probably should though right now.
Yeah. All right. And we talked about nymphs there. So let's move into other food forms.
Yeah.
I really love to fish streamers in the morning, first light, at dawn in the winter. Not because it's going to be the best option necessarily off the bat all day long. Like we just mentioned, our nymphs are probably going to be our best option, but because that's the time of the day when that streamer is going to be in my best favor. And, I really love to fish that streamer. And in the morning, I find best success on it. If I can get a half hour in of good action, I'm going to get it. And then I'll switch over to nymphs. How do you feel about that?
Yeah, less sun, right? That's what...
Yeah, it really does come down to that, doesn't it?
When we did the Fighting the Elements podcast, I said, a couple of you guys agreed that sun is the hardest element to deal with. I feel like especially brown trout just go, too much sun. I'm not eating, And so, in the wintertime, high sun, it never gets too high, but it can get very bright, right?
Right.
And especially if there's snow on the ground. There's a lot of light midday. I'm with you. How do you fish those streamers? Is it low and slow? Do you just dead drift the streamers?
Again, it's not like this one approach is going to be the best, but if I'm going to go into a day of fishing, I'm not going to dead drift them necessarily. I'm going to get them on the bottom, at least close to the bottom. I might even fish shallow bank water.
Yeah.
But really my approach is to fish them at a slower pace, but just kind of not necessarily jig, but pulse them. So that they're always got some sort of action in them, and they kind of die and they come back to life, but they're not going up and down on the drop. They're more or less traveling in a linear plane, but just kind of pulse throughout that. That's my best streamer approach in the wintertime for me.
That's nice. So you kind of go against the grain for what is popular right now. Everybody's talking about, seriously. Everybody's talking about jigging streamers. I think it's a great thing, up and down, up and down. And yet, like you're talking about, and I've seen you do it, I've seen a streamer that is not going up and down, but it's mostly holding its plane or holding its zone there in the water column, gets eaten more. Anyway, we are absolutely going to dig into that real deep, in a few episodes from now. So that's streamers. We're going to get to that in more depth. And then let's just say briefly what dry fly opportunities we kind of expect in the wintertime. Like for me, fishing these spring creeks, there are springs that literally come off of the bank or it's usually off of the bank. You can see them. And you can still see green plants, right there on the bank, signaling like, hey, here's some warmer water.
Yeah.
By now, fishing all these local streams, I kind of know where they are. And I'm going to say around 11 o'clock, not every day, but on many days, you're going to have a nice midge hatch. And by nice, I mean pretty significant.
That's cool.
And I'm not the only one who knows it. The trout know it. You know, they know it better than I
You
do.
and the trout.
I will say too, it's a 10-inch trout that knows it. It's it's not, you know what I mean? It's not the 20-inch trout that, well, he knows it. He doesn't care, is what I'm saying.
Yeah.
I don't catch large trout in the winter on dry flies, usually. But what I do catch, you know, on dry flies, I feel like, whoa, that was fun. It's January 30th, and I just caught a fish on a dry fly. Like
cool.
I get excited about that. I get excited about late winter opportunities when the olive hatch starts. And we have friends, you know, from all over the country. And I know there are plenty of places south of here. You know, you go Virginia, North Carolina, South Carolina, even especially Georgia. You know, some of those tailwaters especially, they have olive hatches all the time.
They do.
You know, so go get them. And when you can kind of plan your day around that. Hey, I'll nymph in the morning, or maybe streamer fish in the early morning, and then I'll nymph until the olive hatch starts. And then I know that they're going to be, you know, the trout are going to be kind of looking up through the mid column. And so, I'll put my tag fly or maybe both flies in the middle of the column with a nymph. And then when I start to see rises, there I am. I'm going to change my leader and meet the trout on their own terms up top, fish into those risers. And who knows what happens after. But I mean, that's fun. You know, none of us,
fun.
I don't know anybody who just ignores dry flies. Give me a dry fly chance, dry fly opportunity, and I'm going to meet it. Get them to eat it.
Yep.
That's the challenge.
Yep. Unless you're dead set on learning one aspect like yourself. What was it? Didn't you say you used to be the guy who nymphed through the dry fly hatch because you were learning how to nymph, right?
For sure.
Unless you're in that sort of learning mode, it's hard to deny that temptation.
Yeah. I think that's fair too. Again, I almost feel like it's unfair when I tell people like, hey, you got to be super versatile. You got to meet the trout on their own terms. Well, but again, I spent 5 years just tight line nymphing at close range. I didn't even expand the range until I really met Pat and started to see what he could do with, really he expanded the range by putting an Indy on. We've talked about this. And then I streamer fished for a full year. And you've done that. I know you've gone through spells where you're just, like you said, learning one thing.
Yep. It's really fun.
Yeah, it is fun. Once you learn it, well, now you have it. And it's like riding a bike. You get right back on it and you can do it at any moment. And it's yours. Those tactics are yours. And then you can truly be versatile. Anyway, didn't we have a full podcast on versatility, right?
I believe we do.
I say that a lot now, don't I?
Yeah.
We have a full podcast.
It's become a theme, hasn't it?
It has. That was the objective, though. By the time I die, there will be...
Jeez. You'll have an orange link to click on for every question you have.
For everything. Well, the goal from the beginning, remember, was to leave everything I knew about fishing for my boys.
Yeah, that's fantastic.
They were super young in 2014 when I started this. But now the goal is not just for the boys, but for anybody who wants to listen, for anybody who wants to watch the videos, for anybody who wants to read the articles. There's some information on Troutbitten out there about what we're talking about. I like it.
And that's the purest goal you could have. It's not necessarily self-motivated. It's, hey, what can I, share? So
no, that's true. But, in fairness too, I mean, this is what my career is now. So I make money. There's revenue coming in from it all. And I always sincerely appreciate that support because it allows me to create the next thing. It allows us to do what we're doing right here. Anyway, how we get off on that tangent?
It's all your fault. Let's talk about problems in the wintertime.
Problems?
Yeah. How about things like
winter fishing's easy. No, it's easy. Winter fishing's easy. That's why everybody does it.
Well, it's easy for me. It's not so easy for you. So I was going to, address this. How about, we got ice in our guides. It's hard to park in areas that are covered in snow piles.
Dude, that's true.
Try to walking through 2 foot of snow, you sweat to death on your way in. There are some inconveniences going on here.
There are. What you said about the snow piles. I was on one of our favorite rivers, and I went up to the kind of the top end, and I kept driving because the river's kind of right along the road. I kept driving. I'm like, man, that is I can't even park at this access. Next
Right.
access, I can't even park. It's like the plow had pushed all the snow off of the road and right into
They know
the
where
access
the pull
area.
offs are. That's where they put the snow.
Right. And every pull off except one, and I passed that one up. I'm like, maybe I'll come back to that. When I got to the top end, and I'm like, man, oh wow. Oh, that's plowed out. And so I just parked in it. I didn't even think about it. I just parked in it. It's actually right against the state game lands sign. So I got out, I put my waders on, I go upstream, I fish. I'm in state game lands. I'm good. I get back, and there's a nasty note on my windshield saying, I didn't plow this out so you could park here. And,
No kidding.
and on and on. It wasn't nice. It was like 2 or 3 paragraphs saying I shouldn't have parked there, and I'm rude and inconsiderate. And
Handwritten note.
oh yeah, it was handwritten and on my windshield.
Oh, gee.
And like I say, a few paragraphs telling me it was overboard. It really was over. Go ahead and make your point. Like, please don't park here again. And I didn't plow this out for you. But I know where it came from. And I know that person gets their mail from that spot that's right beside the pull-off. However, I also know that the pull-off is on state game land. And if you chose to plow out state game land property, I might park on it.
The state says, thank you.
Yeah. And quite honestly, you can get into your mailbox, turn around just fine because I pulled all the way back. There was plenty of room. There were 50 feet that he plowed out. Why am I even talking about this? How do we keep getting off on these tangents?
I don't know. I think you just needed to convince yourself you didn't do anything wrong.
I needed to release that. Right? I wanted to go leave a note on the guy's front door and say, or just knock on it and go, look, like, don't be mean. Like, let's get along. Let's be friends.
It's not how we do things here.
Let's be friends. You plowed out for me.
You plowed out. See how this works? Works real good. So those, for example, are a few.
That's a problem, right? That's why I started talking about
problems, but there are also reasons people just don't go out in the wintertime.
Yeah.
There's a lot of reasons people probably don't go out in the wintertime. One, I think, is this belief that the fishing slows down like to a non-existent rate once the temperatures drop.
Yeah. People don't know you can have success.
No, I have a lot of friends who casually fish or, fish in the spring, and I'll tell them, I fish all year round. Can you catch fish in the wintertime?
Right.
Yeah, you can catch it. You can catch fish. Sometimes it's the best fishing of the year.
Yeah.
And, each time I get this shocked reaction. But again, if the gumption or the will to try isn't there, you're just not going to find out.
No, I mean, you got to have the right approach. You also have to adjust those expectations. Like we said, I don't expect to catch as many in the winter as I do in the fall, summer, or spring. And although I'm pleasantly surprised many times that, wow, I just had the best day of the year on this January 30th day, whatever.
Yeah.
They also don't adjust, I don't think, to the conditions. You have to adjust. Don't expect what worked in July to work in December, in January, in February, early March. It won't. If you're really lucky, I guess it will. But again, go ahead out there with that number 18 Parachute Adams and see what happens.
Right.
And
I get that it's not a comfortable place to be. So
comfort.
If you're not, some folks they're not comfortable with being out there in colder temperatures, and that's okay. Not everybody can handle 8 degrees, and that's not a problem. It's not comfortable. It doesn't feel good.
No,
but it's another way that folks stay off the water in the wintertime.
Yeah, that's the thing. I mean, it is. It's cold. Something hurts. That's the hardest obstacle out there in the wintertime is the cold. If you're just too cold, then you can't focus on what it takes to catch trout. So you're going to go out there, you're too cold. The whole time you're thinking about how cold you are, and you don't catch fish because you're not fishing. And there's a lot that's been written on how to stay warm. But we're going to take all of this further by digging a little bit deeper than talking about just wearing the right layers, right? In fact, the next podcast, episode 2 of this winter fly fishing skill series, is all about your hands. I said that earlier.
That's great. Right.
It's a whole podcast on taking care of your hands in the winter and how to keep them warm and useful in even the coldest temperatures. I mean it, 8 degrees. We'll cover what works and what doesn't, because there are some things that are more mainstream, I suppose, that I often scratch my head. I'm like, that doesn't work. I've tried that. And like, that's okay for 40 degrees. It's not okay for 14 degrees. And so we're going to cover a lot of that in the hands podcast and then the head, shoulders, knees, and toes. Because isn't that a song, Austin?
Head, shoulders, knees, and toes.
Thank you.
Knees
I'm
and
going to put
toes.
that in the outro over and over.
You asked.
You sang it well.
I delivered.
Hey, so one more thing as we wrap this up. I want to do something toward the end of each of these episodes. I'd like to share a few stories about winter fishing, something remarkable, something memorable maybe. Perhaps it's a full day or even a short experience that keeps you going and makes you want to get back out there in the wintertime. You have a collection of these stories. It doesn't have to be long. And we're running a little late here. I suppose it shouldn't be long. Do you have a quick story for us?
Yeah, a quick one. When you say that, one pops to mind. And it's not even that anything very significant happened that day. It was just a very memorable set of events. It was actually when we fished together, maybe 7 or 8 years ago. And we traveled up north for a day and we left in the dark, probably 4 a.m. And on our way up, we encountered some serious snow squalls up over the mountain. 18-wheelers are pulled off on the side of the highway. And we made our way over the other side and fished throughout the day. And I call the fishing, decent to wintertime standards. And we caught fish throughout heavy snowfalls, which was, one, beautiful, but two, just a unique experience to be part of. But it got incredibly cold down in, the mid-teens to single digits. Yeah. And at the end of the day, we got back in your truck and, your in-laws didn't live too far away. And we thought, okay, let's go stop over and say hello. And we drove over to their place and we got out of your truck and we went back to the tailgate and we started taking our waders off. And I got my boots off. Okay, I get the waders off. And I kind of lay them up on the back of the tailgate there. And I'm starting to put my stuff away. And I grab my waders. And they're standing on their own 2 feet. It was so cold that the air had frozen the residual water left on the waders that they were rigid and standing on their own 2 neoprene booties, which was pretty far out. So then we put those back in the truck and, we walked into your in-laws and it was, 1, incredibly warm, but 2, the smell of beef stew filled the house. Yeah. And we sat down, watched the end of a football game, and ate delicious beef stew. And what a wonderful end to a beautiful winter day.
That's it. I mean, I think the challenge of the cold makes everything better. It makes that when you are sitting down, before you go to sleep, as you're dozing off, you're thinking like, I earned it.
Yeah. Have you ever been sleeping in a tent and it's pouring rain outside? But you can hear the rain droplets beating down on the roof of the tent, but you're dry and you're warm and you're safe. Mm-hmm. That's the same feeling, that same satisfaction I get when it's 8 degrees, it's 10 degrees outside, and I'm catching fish and I'm comfortable and I'm winning to some degree.
I'm winning. That's awesome. And then at the end of the day, you do have that, I call it river exhaustion, where you're sitting in your chair or you're laying down in bed and you're about to fall asleep and you could tell, you're like, these are my last few minutes of the day. And you're thinking about those couple fish, or maybe you rounded the bend and the sun was just right. Just everything lined up, man. Yep. And I don't care if you caught fish or not. You enjoyed yourself and you're thinking back to that. But your body is just worn out from not just walking far and doing all the things that it takes to be a wade fisherman for trout, but you're just tired, pleasantly tired, and you earned it.
All right. You can almost feel that current, still beating against you a little bit.
I love that.
Yeah.
All right. There it is. Season 6, Episode 1, Winter Fishing. Be back next week. Austin, will you read us out?
Yeah, man. So remember, the Troutbitten Project is a free resource for all anglers. The Troutbitten website hosts over 900 articles with endless stories, commentaries, tactics, tips, and more. Find what you like through the top menu and through the search page. Navigate by way of the categories and the tags too. Be sure to find the Troutbitten YouTube channel, currently featuring the Troutbitten Tip Series in collaboration with Wilds Media. These are short, useful, and unique tips for your fly fishing life. Thank you for listening to the Troutbitten Podcast. Please give the show a 5-star rating on Apple Podcasts and leave a comment, because it really helps. Until next time, friends, fish hard, enjoy the day, and find your life on the water.
Hey, it's wintertime.
There's no fish in this stream.
Yeah.
No.
Yes.
No.
Yeah.
Absolutely.
No.
No good reason.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Absolutely.
Right.
I feel like we're good at it, you know?
Head, shoulders, knees, and toes. Knees and toes. Head, shoulders, knees, and toes. Knees and toes. Head, shoulders, knees, and toes. Knees and toes. Head, shoulders, knees, and toes. Knees and toes.